So the next question, many years ago, I read Robert Sutton's book, Good Boss, Bad Boss, completely changed my thinking on the workplace. And I still remember so many of the examples, illustrations that he used. And, um, that book had lots of examples on, being a good boss and also toxic, difficult work environments. Even if our workplace is not healthy or harmful, we rarely expect our need for affection to be met at work.
Right.
So definitely if a workplace is toxic or unhealthy, we do not expect affection at all. But even if it is relatively healthy, we don't expect that need to be met. But in the Bible, we read that everything is summed up in this, that one another. And I think I understand what you're saying. All of these relationship needs falls under love.
Yes.
Just affection. Every need
100%.
falls love.
That's 100% true.
But specifically, if somebody has this need for affection, what does that mean? How can, we cultivate in identifying all of these needs, but some of these needs, that is more personal and in the workplace. And how do we identify it and how do we fulfill it for our team members?
It's a great question. And honestly, some of them, I would argue that some of them you don't. Like when I thinking about in the workplace, the workplace is going to be always going to be different than, say, your home or your time with your friends. I mean, every single, it would be an interesting study. I haven't done this, but to actually take lots of different locations and different places where people spend time and then ask the question, what does it look like to meet a given need in this space, and how is it different than meeting the need in this space? And then sometimes maybe you just don't. So where I work now, there are people I work with that I've known a really long time and we're really good friends, right? So I might hug them when I see them if I haven't seen them, especially in a couple of days. But I certainly don't go around hugging everybody, And so, so you have like a simple distinction like that, which is there's just people better than others. And there's some people that I've known for a really long time who, for reasons that are personal to them, don't like to be touched. Mm-hmm. So I do not show affection to them physically in any way because I respect that. But what I will seek to do is to go out of my way to express my love and care for them in a way that I can, that's appropriate. And the other thing too that's interesting is the needs they're not exactly mutually exclusive either. And so I'm trying to think of something that might affections is an interesting one, because you do have physical needs. That one is there is something about that is a little bit more like mutually exclusive. But if I could not share my affection to somebody physically, but I wanted to communicate to them that I love them, part of it would be the respect of not touching them. Would communicate to them, he knows enough about me to know this particular thing. And then to get to know them, to see what does land for them. Well, they don't like affection. They need it, but they can't quite receive it from me in the way that I'd like to show it. But they really respond to acceptance and appreciation, because maybe, especially if everybody knows that so-and-so doesn't like to be touched, that might make things a little bit awkward. Well, all right, I'm gonna turn up the dial on acceptance for this person. I really appreciate you exactly the way that you are. And so I'm going to spend time with you the way that I would, with anybody else. And I'm going to go out of my way to communicate how I see you're still on equal footing, even if everybody knows that, you know, you're kind of standoffish. I'm not going to sit there and make jokes about that because that might make you uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so I'll try to recognize this about this person and then go out of my way to communicate love in other ways that they'll receive. And so it still lands. It has kind of an aggregate effect.
Yes.
They do still need affection. Um, it might not be, I mean, you also think about how this can be complicated with somebody with autism, for example, somebody
Yes.
who's on the spectrum. They may, in none of their relationships, may want physical touch and to receive love in that way. And so it's like you have to kind of work around it. So sometimes that's what you end up doing.
Yes. Yes. Well, you're making me think, so that's good. So what I understand from what you're saying is that, you know, we don't just have one need, we have lots, all of these needs. They're not, you know, mutually exclusive of one another. So when it is more like a personal need, the next thing that came to my mind was, you know, security. To feel secure in a personal relationship is different from feeling secure at the workplace.
Yes.
So what you're saying is meeting those closer, more intimate way of meeting a need is different than meeting it at the workplace, where it is different. And we can meet it at a different level at the workplace and at a much more level, deeper level outside the workplace. And that's okay.
Right. Yeah, because you
Sorry.
could, one way that to kind of get at the heart of what relational needs are about is you could replace the word relational needs with intimacy needs. So if you thought of like, what is this about? Okay, well, let me just, every time I hear relational, let me associate it with intimacy. Oh, well, that makes sense because there's different people I want different levels of intimacy with. And that helps to define the appropriateness of how you express
Yes.
and meet the, but also, I mean, it's going to be different culturally too. You know,
Yes.
you go to a different place and, you know, in the United States, people don't generally greet friends with a kiss, but in other parts of the world they do. But if you tried that here, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on? Yeah. But it's, you know, so a lot of the specific expressions are very culturally derived. And so that's going to be true from like one country to the next or one subculture within each country to the next. But then also, every, you know, workplaces have a different culture than home life. So if you think of it as like, well, these are uh, intimate relationships in different contexts, and that might help you get a grasp on what the different what expressions would be appropriate. The
Yes.
needs are the same, they don't change,
Yes.
but the way the person receiving the care is going to interpret the behavior, right?
Yes.
Somebody comes to me, a good friend of mine comes to me and gives me a hug. And so when that happens, I think about it, right? And so it feels good physically, but then also I recognize, wow, so and so, yeah, this person likes me. We're good friends. It reminds me of we've been good friends for a long time. I really care about this person. Man, I want to spend more time with this guy. So now you can see that that sequence of the person meets the needs, and then what does that do to your thinking? What does that do to your emotions? And then how does that motivate you? And then how do you act based on that? Well, you're going to interpret the behavior and the way that someone tries to meet your needs. If you know, if I'm at work and I know that these are not these, I'm expecting less from people at work because we don't have the same level of intimacy. And so, and then they are communicating to me at that appropriate level, then the way I interpret it is like, I love working here, right?
Yes.
And so, does that meet all of my need for affection? No. Uh, but I have these other relationships where that I
Yes.
get, it's met differently there. And then that still, it all goes into the same bucket.
Yes. Yes. I understand what you're saying. I will show affection, but the way I show affection is different for a person who is very close to me in my personal life, and it is the way I show affection is different to somebody that I'm working with, and the way I show affection is different to somebody who's in a different department that I'm working with, even though we're working in the same company.
That's right. Yeah. And I will make, there are people that my relationship at work is very formal, and then there's colleagues and it's more casual, and we'll make jokes and stuff. And so, and even the camaraderie of being able to be playful and joke with each other lands and meets relational needs. Even if you don't know what category to put it in, it's still having a positive impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question is on a topic that we did not discuss much.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time. We spend a lot of time at work, and we spent a lot of time talking about all of this. But we do spend a lot of time at work. We do spend a lot of time with other people that we work with, and this is something connected to trauma.
Yeah.
We go through trauma, and sometimes workplaces where people are actually looking for help but are not able to express and ask for help.
Mm.
So at the workplace, you'd mentioned comfort is one of the things you mentioned to me many months ago when we were talking, that somebody who's going through trauma, their primary relationship need at that time is comfort.
Yeah.
And I heard you say right now, even though comfort is the primary relational need that we have, and you at that time when we talked mentioned that God is a God of comfort. But when you talked about your work with people who were homeless, you mentioned that even though that's a core need that they have because of trauma, that's not the need that they're ready to receive, that relational need.
Yes.
So how can, in a healthy workplace, how can we reflect and imitate God in being sensitive to people or recognizing people who've gone through trauma, because that does affect their productivity, and understand what their relationship need is and meet it?
It's a great question. With comfort's an interesting one, because another thing I do, this might be reflected in Ferguson's work. If it is, I just haven't read it. It's just something as I've continued to take his model and then off in my own direction and apply it. And I also think sometimes about what relationship do these relational needs have to each other. And so, and again, I think what prompted me to think about that in part was my work at the Salvation Army, when I thought, if I can't comfort them, am I not effective? I'm like, no, I can do something else. And so then I thought, well, then maybe these relational needs are sort of adjacent to each other sometimes. So if I can't directly meet the need for comfort in precisely the way I think, I'm like, man, I really have a strong sense of what would be therapeutic for this individual, but my relationship is such that I really can't. So then what do I do instead? Do I do nothing? How helpful can I be is the question. And the answer is you can still be very helpful, because what are the other needs the person has that are adjacent to their need for comfort? And in this case, in the workplace, especially if you have someone you're working with who is experiencing that, they're traumatized and there's certain symptoms they experience at certain times, and usually they work pretty well, but then whether it's the season of the year or they're coming up on an anniversary and they're grieving, and it's just there's certain situations that come up. If I can't be the source of comfort for this individual, I can be the source of support, and support is really a big deal for somebody like who you're describing. So I can recognize, for example, that this employee might need more time off, or maybe they need to work from home if they can. Do I have resources here that can I refer them to a counselor? And so sometimes that's something that can be done. Or if in a different culture, what kind of community care is available for somebody who is going through trauma and needs something like that. So it may not happen at the workplace, but what instead I could do is I could say, you know what, I really care about you and I want you to take the time that you need. And also you might know more about this than I do. Would you tell me what you need? Are there things that I can provide for you? And then they might say, no, I don't think there's anything you can do. It's like, well, what about time? Do you need to take time out to rest? Do you need to take time out to see somebody, to talk through these things, or to engage into some other kind of activity with others that's therapeutic? So they know that I care. They know that I'm not their counselor if I'm their boss, right? So they're not expecting me to be the source of comfort in the same way that their counselor, their best friend might be, for example. But I'm recognizing my role and what I can do. And I'm like, I can meet their need for support. I can encourage them. I can say, or I can give a small dose of comfort. I could say, I can see you're really going through something, and I want you to know that's okay. And I want you to be well, and I want to support you however I can. So let me start by asking what support would be helpful. So just by saying that, I've given a little bit of comfort that's probably not going to freak anybody out, even if they're guarded. That's enough to just go, oh, he's recognizing that I'm in pain and he's addressing it, but in a way that doesn't make me feel weird. And then, and he's willing to be practical, but to not invade. So he's like, can I, what kind of support, do you know what you need, or is there something I can offer? Or it could be as simple as, time off. So I think of it as comfort adjacent. What are things that I'm like, I recognize my role. There's certain kind of relational boundaries in place. So I can't do everything I can imagine doing. But what can I do to help that person get to where they need to go so that they can receive the comfort that they need? That might be more appropriate to my role.
Well, just wrapping up here, Aaron. So thank you for, just saying how somebody can take the assessment. We will do exactly what you said. Google David Ferguson and 10 relationship needs and put the link. Sure. And so if the PDF is downloaded, I'm assuming that you can score it, you can see it for yourself, where you stand in your relational needs, right?
Mm-hmm. Even the one that, let me see, just at a glance, the one that I picked here, sometimes they'll be arranged in different ways. There's some of them and all of these, just in the world of what you could download online. Let's say you downloaded multiple ones and you said, these look a little different. You'll find some that just don't really have an assessment and they just talk about the needs. But others, sometimes, like this one, it doesn't score it on a number. It just has the 10 needs spelled out, and there's a box. And there's two boxes. One is myself and the other one's my partner. And so if my wife and I took this, really it would be like, I would say, what do you think is your top need today? And what's mine? Let's look at this and just mark an X, and then let's trade papers and see, right? That's just a really simple, it's not a scientific diagnostic. It's just a conversation starter, But then there's other ones that are more involved, and then you actually get a numeric score, and then you can rate them. And then those results will change over time. So you could find a number of different types of things just Googling them. But then also on the greatcommandment.net, those books almost always have, usually they're designed actually as workbooks. So they have a lot of information, but then there's exercises, and usually that'll include an assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is even if you don't have the assessment where you can numerically score what someone's relational needs are, just be aware of what those relational needs are and be intentional in giving them and self-aware and knowing what yours are in receiving it.
That right there, as simple as it is, that's already a game changer. That would have a huge effect by itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think, people will try it and see what it is, because this is just whole new knowledge area. It was for me when you talked to me about relational needs. I'd never heard about that.
It's good.
Yes. Aaron, thank you for giving your time.
It's my pleasure.
I learned from it. So I know anybody who's listening will also learn from it. And thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.